To introduce our first plenary speaker. Uh, Václav Triček. He is a full professor of the Institute of Czech National Corpus. And here in our institute, we also do a lot of work with corpora creation, compilation. So we are really looking forward to your talk. And Václav focuses his interests. I just introduced corpus linguistics, quantitative analysis of language, corpus-based discourse analysis, descriptive grammar of Czech, language register variation, and study of media discourse. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone here in this room and those of you who are online. Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here. It's my first time here, and it's great so far, so I hope I will not make it worse by this presentation. The main message of my talk is simple. I would like to encourage you to make a multidimensional model of register variation for your own languages. And I would like to convince you by showing how we did it for the Czech and what are the applications of it, and there are vast of them. The main point here I'm going to make is that if you have a register model, multidimensional model of register variation, then we can compare languages on this basis, and that would be really, really interesting. So please think about it through this presentation. So this is the main message. If you do not like longish presentations, you can go grab a coffee, because you know that's the gist of it. To reframe it, because as you've heard, I'm from the Institute of the Czech National Corpus, which is a language infrastructure for linguists. So we provide texts and data and tools and so on. So my initial question was, what is it that makes the infrastructure good, or what is a good infrastructure? I think it's an infrastructure that opens up new possibilities for linguistic research, not necessarily only in the field of corpus linguistics. So obviously, we have to have a large data sets, corpora, text corpora, or other data sets. We also know that we need tools for annotation. We know that we have to have concordances and analytic tools. But the point is that perhaps it would be good if we think about this package, this infrastructure package, as having also something like multidimensional model of register variation. So the outline of my talk would be that I will give you really brief introduction to what the multidimensional analysis in the Biberian sense is, how we did it, what are the direct benefits of the multidimensional model on the data, on corpora, and then I'll show you some hopefully interesting applications of that. So the multidimensional analysis, or the register analysis, stems from the study from Doug Biber back in 1980s, actually. And it is an attempt to model functional variation or functional variability in language, as opposed to other variations which are related to demographics or idiolects and so on. So this functional variation is closely motivated by context or situation, or both. The main assumption or the hypothesis behind it is that when we produce a text, it involves a series of interrelated choices. Whenever we use one particular mean, we are in a way motivated to use a related one. So, for example, if we use a passive in Czech, for example, we tend to use more, nominal phrases as well, because these two features are interconnected in a way that they both are involved in, say, academic register. The output of the multidimensional analysis is twofold, basically. First of all, we have this dimensions of variation, which tells us how the variability actually can be described in a language. And then the second output is establishing registers. And these registers I'm going to talk about later on. The benefit of having multidimensional models is also in the fact that whenever you have it, any text can be analyzed through this model and can be projected on this model. So whatever data set you have, you can describe it with the means of these dimensions and registers as well. So if you are in this, business of doing a multidimensional analysis, you should perhaps go through these 5 steps. So first you compile a corpus on which you will make the model. Then you compile a list of features that are important, like that they are function laden, or they can be perceived as those features which are connected to the functional variability. You have to operationalize them and extract them from the data. That's obvious, and that's the hard part. Then there is the part of statistical evaluation. Normally we do factor analysis. And the factor analysis gives us dimensions. These dimensions then have to be interpreted, because the statistical analysis gives you just numbers, and then you have to translate it into the language in which linguists will understand what these dimensions actually are. And then the final step is establishing registers, like the clusters of text. I'll show you like some details for each of the steps so that you know what we went through. So our case, multidimensional analysis of Czech, it's not just that one-man show. We did it with my colleagues. Here they are. It was a wonderful team, and it was like 3-year experience, which was really like refreshing. And yeah, go for it. If you're interested in any of the results, we have this web page on our institute where all the important facts are included, and also you'll find the references to all the outputs. I mean, the papers we've published. Some of them are in Czech, but most of them are in English, so it should be quite accessible to you. So, first of all, when we started, we knew that we can get inspired from the original Biber study, but we also have to adjust it for the Czech situation, because we know that Czech as a Slavic language has some specificities. For example, morphology, rich morphology, free word order. We do not have that much syntactic features as Doug Biber had. And most importantly, Czech is sociolinguistically in a situation which borders with diglossia. So there are 2 languages. One can be called the standard one, and the other one is called Common Czech. And these 2 varieties are differentiated by morphology mostly. So we have to take these into account as well. We've created a corpus, and we call this corpus Coditex. I will work with this corpus later on in this presentation, so let me just briefly introduce it. Coditex is something you would call a traditionally carefully designed corpus. So we picked texts actually to make the corpus as diverse as possible. So we knew that we wanted to have the corpus to include all varieties of language, all text types that are available here. So we have 3 modes: written language, spoken language, online communication. These modes are then subdivided into 8 divisions, and these are then even further divided into 45 classes. So there are 45 text classes in the corpus. And since we want to have the corpus as diverse as possible, we included text chunks, text excerpts, not whole texts, because we want to have it like diversified also in terms of authors and topics and so on and so on. It is not a large corpus. It just has like 11 million words and 3.3 thousand texts or text chunks. So this table is probably you cannot read it, but this is just the list of the 45 classes, and to give you an just the idea how diverse it was. This is a table that can be found in many of those papers I've just referenced to. The next step was to creating a list of features. Now, we've created a list of 122. Well, originally we have more than 140, but then we had to trim it down because we found out that some of the features we were unable to operationalize, or it was too erroneous. So that it was we were not happy with the precision or the recall of the operationalization of the features. So we have to trim it down. We also found out that some features which we thought that might be interesting for the functional variation actually appeared in very small proportion of texts. So, for example, we had features like taboo language, like taboo words. And we thought, yeah, that might be interesting because, taboo. But it turns out that it was like less than 10% of text in the whole corpus, which actually contains at least one. So, yeah, maybe you think that Czechs are decent speakers, but no, that's not the case. It's because just, taboo words do not appear that much in majority of text classes, such as, fiction. Yeah, in fiction it can appear, but in non-fiction text, in journalism and so on. So the final list contained 122 features, and it went through all the levels of linguistic description, from phonetic features, and we kept in mind that those phonetic features should not be those features that would be found just in spoken language. So it has to be something that you at least potentially can find somewhere else. So these are all features that can, at least in theory, appear in all the text types we've gathered. We had a lot of emphasis on rich morphology and derivation, obviously, because Czech is rich in inflection. So I won't go through all of those features again. If you're interested in that, you can go back to the papers we've published, or I can send you a list of them with detailed descriptions of what they are. Basically, you start like a fishing expedition. So whatever comes to your mind, whatever you find in your reference books and stylistic books, and in Doug Biber's original study, you throw in there, and then you find out that some of those things you cannot make, and so that's how the list is built. Then the next step is statistical evaluation. We've done well. First of all, some of you may find out that there are fewer chunks here at this slide than on the previous one, and that's because we have to remove some of the text as well. We found out that some of the texts were like they contained language that was corrupt, not in the linguistic way, but in the technical way. So we have to exclude them from the analysis. So the reasons were purely formal, not linguistic. We've conducted factor analysis, which is an analysis that actually takes a table which has, in our case, it has 3,292 rows and 122 columns, and each cell of this table contains the information about how frequently this particular feature was used in this particular text. The factor analysis, what it does is that it tries to find out latent factors, latent dimensions which are there. So like tries to find a correlation between features and tries to unify them in one, say, dimension or factor. Statisticians would call it factor. And we ended up with 8 those latent factors, 8 dimensions, which were then interpreted. The interpretation is the trickiest part of the multidimensional analysis. You have basically 2 pieces of information here. First of all, you have something statisticians would call loadings, and these are the correlations of the original features with the dimensions. So for example, you know that for dimension 1, there is a strong correlation between, say, nominative case. So you know that whenever a text contains a lot of nominatives, it will bring it to one extreme on that particular dimension. So that's one piece of information you have. The other piece of information is factor scores. Factor scores are actually scores of the texts. So you know that you've created a corpus which contains, say, fiction, novel texts, and you find out that novel texts usually on these dimensions are, you know, in the center or in the middle. And so this is also one piece of information you can use in the interpretation of the dimension. So to make the long story short, we've went through all these things that you can consider, and we've come up with these 8 dimensions for Czech. Now, the dimensions can be different in different languages and different approaches and so on. Biber has like 5 of them. We have 8, and that has some statistic reasons, but I won't go into that detail. So the 8 dimensions are here. The most important ones are the first and the second, dynamic and static. So this dimension actually differentiates between texts which are verbal or clausal heavy, and on the other hand, texts which are nominal or phrasal, we call them static. The second dimension actually differentiates between spontaneous communication and prepared communication. And that's the difference between this when you can formulate and reformulate your text in written mode, whereas if you are in the process and you have to communicate online. The third dimension differentiates between texts with higher and lower level of cohesion. The fourth dimension differentiates between polythematic or monothematic texts, or it can be also understood as texts which are lexically varied and texts which are repetitive. Fifth dimension is somewhat strangely labeled as the higher amount of addressee coding. It is basically well, how many explicit references to communication partners you have in text. So that's something you find out not in conversation, because in conversation we do not address each other. We know to whom we are talking, but that's something you find in screenplays actually a lot. Sixth dimension describes the difference between general text and particular texts with particular reference. So that's the difference between non-fiction and, for example, journalistic text. So non-fiction text speaks about cars, how they work, and so in general, but journalistic text speaks about this particular car in this particular situation on this street and what happened to it. Seventh dimension is the difference between prospective and retrospective, and by retrospective we mean past tense basically, and this retrospective actually is used mostly in narration. Finally, eighth dimension is the dimension about reflecting whether the text signals attitudes or not. So these are our interpretation, our labels, and to give you just, example how we come to this, just look at the first dimension, that's the dimension dynamic versus static, and what you can see as the most dynamic texts, the most verbal heavy are romance novels, letters, web forums, crime novels, and elicited speech. These are the most dynamic ones. On the other hand, the most static here are professional text from natural sciences, Wikipedia articles, scientific text, encyclopedias again, and this is administrative text. Administrative texts tend to be less dynamic. So what can we see here are the two shades of dynamicity or verbality. First, it is narration, the romance novels, but then here are the letters, and in letters we Sometimes we do tell story in letters, but mostly we contemplate, we think. So that's also some kind of verbality. This reflective texts. These are the positive loading features in the first dimension. So as you can see, there are lots of verbs in it and verbal related categories, such as, I don't know, adverbs and so on. On the other hand, the negative loading features that pull the text towards the negative extreme, these are mostly those things related to nouns. So nominal modifiers, adjectives, abstract noun, noun premodifiers, and so on and so on. If you look at the second dimension, that's the spontaneous versus prepared, that's the second most important one. You can see that the most spontaneous are private conversation, yeah, that's what you would expect. Elicited speech, again, that's something also you would expect. Broadcasted discussion with a large variation, because some of the speakers, when they are broadcasted, speak like it is a prepared language. Some of them are really spontaneous. And then with a large gap, screenplays to mimic the normal conversation. Again, the negative pole is occupied by natural sciences, social sciences, academia text, Wikipedia text, and administrative text. So if you look at the positive loading features, you find out that there are 2 or 3 types of features that pull those texts into the spontaneous extreme. These are first things that mark interactivity and online production, such as contact expression, fillers, demonstratives, and so on. And B, features which are related to informality, like expressive particles, interjections. And C, these are the features that are related to the specific situation of Czech diglossia. So the difference between mostly the standard and common Czech, but also, as you will see on the next slide, with the spoken and written language. This is the chart representing all the text in the corpus. So each point is text in the corpus on these 2 dimensions. So the first one is the static versus dynamic. So if you go to the west, you are more static. If you go to the east, it's more dynamic. And up in north, it is spontaneous. Down south, it is prepared. Now, as you can see, this is really something. These gray text, these gray spots represent the spoken interaction in Czech. So in a way, this is the line, the borderline between the spoken spontaneous and the remaining number of texts. The bluish one are non-fiction texts. The red one here are journalistic one. Yellow is fiction. Pink one are letters or something like that. So in a sense, this is a map of Czech diglossia. This is how the Czech diglossia works in a sense, because it differentiates between the spoken language and the rest of it. So this was the model. I'm approximately in the middle of my talk. Wow. And I would like to show you some applications of it. So not only that multidimensional analysis allows you to describe the variation in language, but it also allows you an offshoot research. So first of all, registers. We've seen just dimensions, and we've seen that we can describe text by position on particular dimension. We can say this particular text is that much cohesive, this particular text is that much attitudinal, and so on, dynamic or spontaneous. But we can also cluster text together to make something like registers. Now, a register can have several definitions. What I will use here is that definition that says the register is a variety defined by a set of distinct, pervasive, and functional linguistic features. So it is an intratextual perspective. It does not. We do not care whether it says on the cover that this particular text is a novel, or if we see that it is in a journal, and so we know that it is a paper. But we concentrate solely on the linguistic features in it. So if we have registers, we get another piece of meta information about the data. So in normal corpus, you get the information that something is, for example, novel, but you don't know whether this particular text is actually a novel that consists of, I don't know, conversations, or if it is a pure narration, or if it is a description of something, or if it is a novel that is, I don't know, produced out of newspaper articles. Such novels are as well. And so another piece of information that can be crucial, actually. So what we did is that we clustered the text in the Coditext corpus, and we ended up with 10 registers. So it was 8 dimensions and 10 registers now. They are grouped into major groups. The first of them is a static. That's those which are like static according to the first dimension, and the other 5 are dynamic ones. And so, as you can see, we named them according to the most prominent position, most prominent feature they have. So the static registers are analysis, popularization, journalism, facts, and argumentation. And the further description tells you in what way they are specific. So argumentation is a static register which is extremely cohesive, for example. On the other hand, dynamic registers are question answering that, actually turns out to be very specific. Thing in our data: conversation, commentary, screenplay, and narration. If you look at the map of the registers in those 8 dimensions, you'll find out this not particularly clear chart, but if you follow 9 here, on the x-axis, there are those 8 dimensions I've introduced earlier, and if you follow 9, that's the middle, the median position of the cluster that we named narration. So narrative register is represented by a relatively high value in dimension 1, so it is dynamic, like average value in dimension 2, so it means it is not spontaneous and neither prepared, in relatively normal or like average position in dimension 3. So it's not cohesive that much. And further on, you find out that there are 2 specificities of the number 9. First of all, it is quite high number in the dimension 5th, so it has a lot of addressee coding. And number 7, it is very retrospective. And so this is something we know from fictional text, from narrational text, that it contains conversation and that it narrates, and the narration is primarily done by past tense. So that's this value. That's why we named this cluster narration. And again, we did it for all 10 clusters. Now, if you look at a normal corpus, like the corpus in 2015, which is 100 million balanced corpus of written contemporary Czech, and you project those texts in the corpus on this model to find out what registers are in there. So you'll find out that, for example, newspaper texts, we have like 1/3 of the corpus is newspaper. You find out that, last proportion of them are facts, like the register-wise, and the second largest is journalism text. Then there is popularization, not much screenplays, obviously. In fiction text, you'll find out that the vastly majority of fictional texts are narration, but some of them are screenplays because we also do have screenplays in the fictional part of the corpus, and so on. Non-fictional text, we do not have the non-fictional part, just the academic text. We also have some popularizational text and so on. So it kind of makes sense that at least 1/3 of that non-fictional part is journalistic register. Then there is argumentation. That's what we do when we write papers and so on, and analysis, popularization as well. So, okay. This is one obvious advantage of having multidimensional model, because it allows you to combine the extra textual information with the features that are in it. Now, the second like really important thing that you can do with it is that you can compare corpora. We use multidimensional model to compare what we call traditional corpus with a web-crawled corpus. For that, we used the method which is called sometimes as additive MDA, and I've already mentioned it. So it is basically using the previously established general multidimensional model to project new text on it. So we've done that on text from web crawl corpus to find out whether the texts in the traditional corpus and the web crawl corpus are comparable in terms of the variation they cover. We all know that it has been in the last 15 years the advent of web crawl corpora. Everyone has it, and I know that there are large corpora of Estonian language as well. We also do have corpora of Czech. We know the benefits of it. They are very large, they are cheap to obtain. We can create families of corpora which can be to some extent comparable. There are tools that allows you to do your own web crawl corporas basically on your own computer. So these are the major advantages. But we know that the disadvantage is that we do not have any metadata for the texts, or very few of them, just the URLs. Unless you do the manual inspection of those URLs, you cannot say what's in there. We therefore are quite uncertain about the composition of web crawl corpora. So we thought that with MDA and the multidimensional model established for Czech, we can ask these questions. How well do web corpora cover the variability in a given language? What do they actually represent? Is it, something that represents the whole language, or at least to the same extent as the traditional corpora do? And that's the practical question. To what extent we can replace the more expensive traditional corpus data with cheaper web data? Now, what you should know before I show you the results is that content of the internet and content of the web crawl corpus is not the same thing. On the internet, several parts of the internet are behind paywalls, and you have to have a login and password, so you do not get there unless you actually try. The web crawl corpus is crawling the content of what Doug Biber calls the searchable web. So that's something you can access without any password, any paying, and so on and so on. So we decided to compare it like dimension-wise and also in an aggregated way. And basically what we are asking is if we have two corpora on one dimension, or texts of two corpora in one dimension, what is their intersection and what is the complement of A and what is the complement of B. We created 2 batches of 5,000 samples. The results were more or less the same. So it was quite a large sample, and we compared those samples of web crawl corpus Araneum bohemicum maximum with the Coditex corpus. The Coditex corpus is created to be as diverse as possible, whereas Araneum bohemicum maximum is created to be as large as possible. So these are the 2 things that we should keep in mind. Now, the results are that these are the 2 batches of samples, that the intersection with the traditional corpus is like 3/4. And then there is a large complement of text, the large complement of variation, I should say, that is not covered by the web corpus, and there is approximately half complement that is not covered by the traditional corpus, and it is contained in the web crawl corpus. What we found out that the dispersions significantly differ on different dimensions. So there is this fact that the web crawl corpora are usually more narrow in their dispersion, whereas the traditional corpus are larger. The major difference is that the traditional corpus, represented here by Coditex, brings more dynamic texts. It also brings texts from the spontaneous extreme. We do not have that much spontaneous Czech language on the web, at least as far as the web crawling is concerned. variation of web sample is fully covered by Coditex as far as the addressee coding is concerned, and what is specific for web samples that in general tend to lean towards the factual extreme. If you recall the opposition, attitudinal factional, so the web called texts are more factional than attitudinal. Now, if we are to compare specific pieces of text with the web samples, this is the chart I've shown you. If you recall, this is the first most important dimension. Static, dynamic, spontaneous, prepared. Now, the dashed line, the dashed ellipsis, represents the area where the web samples are. So this is the web samples. Now, the solid line ellipsis here represents those categories within the Coditex corpus that are fully covered by the web samples. So you can easily replace those categories with the web content. You do not have to bother. So what are they? The yellow one is the spoken non-interactive. These are the prepared text, like written to be spoken text and so on. The blue one here is the written non-fictional text. So these are the academic things and popularization and all kind of stuff. And the pink, purple, or what is it, are the newspapers and magazines. Yeah, you can get a lot of those online. Yeah, you can easily substitute the journalistic content of your corpus with the online journalism, and you would not probably spot a difference. So these are the fully covered ones. Now, we've also looked at the specific web genres, because if you recall, Coditex contains web communication as well. Now, the dashed lines are the web samples. Again, the purple here is what we called online unidirectional communication. These are the static texts that you can find online, like the presentations of companies and so on, Wikipedia articles and such. But the bluish one, which is not fully covered by this web sample, are the web crawl classes, multidirectional, and these are Facebook posts, discussion forums, and so on. So these are those texts you cannot crawl simply from the internet, because you have to have a password or you have to have some kind of access to it. So if you try hard, you can, by crawling that, you can have it, and we had it in Coditex corpus, and we can see that this piece of the corpus, this variation is not covered by the crawling. And finally, what are the specificities? That mostly it is this one, the spoken conversation, the spoken spoken interactive communication, which is not covered by web crawl corpus. You cannot replace spoken corpora by web crawl corpus. That's our resume for here. The pink one are the letters. The private letters, again, something that is partially covered by the web crawl corpus, but not definitely. And the blue one is fiction. Again, some of the fiction you can find online, and you can replace the fiction you have, like from books, with the fiction from the internet, but not all of that. Okay, I've several more applications, but I won't go through all of them. I just wanted to show you what is also something that we did with it, and that's the evolution of genres, because we tend to think that whenever we call something say, journalistic text, it is still the same in time. And since we have the data for at least last 2 decades or 3 decades, we can compare. Now, there are several studies, mostly qualitative ones, that says that, for example, Czech journalism is now less official, less formal, more spontaneous. It has colloquialization in it. And it mostly is the mainstream journalism that is subject to something called tabloidization. So we can use the multidimensional model, find out whether the journalistic texts actually whether it changed in time in the last 3 decades also. So we've created this quite large sample of 4 mainstream titles, and we added this one just for comparison. So this Blesk, which means Flash, is a tabloid, and it is not part of the analysis itself. It is here just, for a comparison. So we've projected on the multidimensional model, and we've established these trends. Now, as you can see, for example, in time, so this is from 1995 till 2017, if you can see that there is a clear trend for being more dynamic. There is not much of a trend in the second dimension, so texts are not much more spontaneous than they used to be, unlike the predictions based on qualitative results. They are less cohesive, and most importantly, they are more particular, less general. Texts are less general. So I'll skip these just to give you some overview. So this is the most important change that actually took place in the last 3 decades. Nobody ever spotted this. So I haven't found any analysis, qualitative analysis of Czech journalism that would say, oh, okay, what's happening here is actually the trend of being less general and more particular. We inform more in detail than we used to. And if you look at the lines, all the titles here show a significant retreat from general to being more particular, more detailed. These are the major tendencies. We've done this also on fictional texts because, yeah, obviously fictional texts also change in time. But I will not show you these charts representing the development. We've focused in the development of fiction on different things. We've focused also on the fact that whether the beginnings and middle portion and end of text actually differ. So when the text begins in narration, when it is in the middle, and when it ends, how they are different register-wise. And we also wanted to find out whether the translations and originals actually differ, because as in all languages of our magnitude, most of the production is translation, so it kind of makes sense. Now, if you consider, for example, the position of text, you'll find out that the beginnings are usually less dynamic, less spontaneous, less cohesive. They are more lexically varied. They do not have that much addressee coding, that much direct speech, and they are more general and more retrospective. The difference might not seem as huge, but they are statistically significant. So we can actually say something about the beginnings of fictional text and about the middle portions and ends. As far as the middle portions and ends, it shows that fictional text tends to be less general and less attitudinal towards the ends. So that's also something that we didn't know. As far as the difference between original and translational text is concerned, so there are also significant differences except for the dimension 5 and 6, and translation tends to be more dynamic, less spontaneous, more cohesive, more thematically focused, more retrospective and factual. Now the question is whether it is due to the process of translation, as we know, whether this is the picture of translationese, or if it is just based on the fact that translators or the publishers just choose specific types of text that are actually different from the original domestic production. So we do not know that, but that's up to someone else to figure it out. Okay, so I'm almost exhausting my time, so I'll probably stop here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And perhaps during the coffee break, I can tell you the rest of the story.
questions to start with? Yes, Ari, please.
Thank you. Extremely interesting, and I will definitely come to you during the coffee break. But do you have any comparisons with other languages, especially in terms of the dimensions that you use?
Yes.
Are the dimensions somehow universal?
That's a great question. Thank you. Well, there are, I don't know, 6 languages that has this multidimensional model. First of them was English and Doug Bibers. And it turns out that there are similarities, especially when it comes to the most important ones. So all the multidimensional analysis show that there is this general distinction between the verbal or the clausal on one hand and nominal or phrasal on the other hand. So that's the most important dimension. In Czech, it is specific that this dimension is actually accompanied by the second one, which marks the spontaneity and the preparedness, which cannot be found, for example, in English. So that's something in other languages it is combined into one. In our case, it is separated into different dimensions because the difference between spoken and written language is so huge in Czech. But these are the general tendencies. I know that there are several attempts to build a team or create a multidimensional model. I know that in Berlin they work on Russian. I also talked to colleagues from Bratislava to conduct a multidimensional analysis of Slovak and so on. So hopefully we will have more multidimensional models to compare them and like bring more results in this term. But yeah, so far we know this.
Thank you. Yes, Margit, please.
Thank you. Could you possibly think about presenting this kind of information in the dictionary?
Yes, that was the last part of my presentation, and basically, to give you just the gist of it. What I think is that usage markers, usage labels are something like association of lexemes with registers, and so if we establish a measure that can associate lexical units with them being, that tendency to appear in certain registers, it can be a basic, not just you cannot take it as it is, but as a basic basis for usage markers. So yes, I think this is something that this is definitely an option.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I wanted to ask you something about sort of variation. You say register, then you have sociolinguistic variation and dialectal variation. So I know something about the Czech diglossia, but I'm not that familiar with it. But I'm thinking about another Slavic language such as Croatian, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have a pronounced tridialectal variation as well, variability, basically vertical multilingualism as well. So do you think that, how would these features that are so important as the input play into maybe notions of variability which are not just register-based, but are definitely manifested within particular registers? Could you, maybe expand the model? Would it complicate the dimensions too much in a way? Thank you.
First of all, it depends heavily on the data you would compile for this project. So in our case, we tend to have all the areas of the Czech Republic represented like equally or proportionally. Proportionally is a better word. And that's one thing. The second thing is the features. So if you compile a list of features that actually covers those differences in the variation, then the analysis can end up with one dimension that will actually show you this is the difference between, I don't know, north and south in your territory. That's something that will happen. But you should always keep in mind that the features you're including in the analysis should be pervasive. That means that all the features should at least has the chance to be present in all types of text. So if there is a regional feature that appears only and only in spoken or the phonetic just the phonetic quality of the text, and cannot appear, for example, in fiction, even if it is a novel based on this area and people in the novel do talk with the local dialect. If this is the case, then it will probably not show up. So that's the major point here.
Yes, please. Yeah, Christina.
Thank you very much. Are you familiar with, I mean, do you know of any applications of the multidimensional analysis on a learner corpora or comparisons between learner and first language speaking corpora?
Yes, I know, actually I haven't done it myself, but one member of our team uses the multidimensional model to compare text from L2 learners, and the main question he asks is whether L2 learners, on what level of proficiency L2 learners can actually distinguish between registers, and if this distinction actually resembles what it should resemble in the target language. So these are L2 learners of Czech, and he gathered text from them and projected on the model to find out whether they follow what is expected, if they are supposed to write a narration on one hand, or if they are supposed to do some kind of argumentative essay. So yes, that's one of the applications that has already been done, not by myself, but yes.
Really a lot of applications.
Yeah, there are.
It's huge potential. Yes, Ben, please.
Thank you. This is beautiful stuff. Must be wonderful to work with corpora that are this rich in information. But it does seem quite labor intensive to create them. So to what extent could you rely on automatic features, and how much did you have to do manual annotation of all these features?
Thank you for this question, and I do not want to ruin the the impression I made. Yeah, so it was. Let me put it this way: it was wonderful 2 years of work with my younger colleagues. Because we wanted to have it as precise as possible. We invested a lot of manual work, but not on the operationalization as such, but on controls. So we had to have checks whether the features, the precision of extraction of those features is good, whether the recall is good. So yes, it was quite labor intensive, but because we want to be sure that we have precise numbers. So the extraction itself is not that difficult. I mean, yeah, you have morphological syntactical annotation, that's quite normal, and then you just the list of features is basically sets of queries. So you query the corpus, and it depends on how careful you are in establishing those queries. And so we want to be sure, so that's why we did manual checks.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have run out of time, and the video recordings will be online in 2 weeks. So maybe a little bit, maybe in 3 weeks. So we will have a chance to look at this again. Thank you very much. And now,
thank you.
Let's have a break. And I have a small present for you from our institute. Thank you for coming. If